Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into the Protestant Revolt, one of the most game-changing moments in Western history. And what's so fascinating is that this massive break from the medieval church wasn't just one single story. Oh no, it played out in totally different ways depending on where you were. So, we're going to break this whole thing down by asking one big question. Was the Reformation really a revolution of faith bubbling up from the people? Or was it more of a calculated political power play, orchestrated by kings and rulers right from the top? Okay, so our first story kicks off in the mountains of the Swiss Confederation. This is a place where the revolution wasn't sparked in some grand palace, but in the minds of religious thinkers. To really get this, you have to picture the scene. Switzerland at the time wasn't one unified country. It was a collection of cantons that had just managed to break free from the Holy Roman Emperor. That independence created this fertile ground for new, radical ideas to really take root, far away from the prying eyes of the Pope or the Emperor. You know, the first big voice for change here was a priest named Zwingli. And get this, he started preaching his new ideas way back in 1516. That's even before Martin Luther was a household name. His challenge to the old ways was so powerful it actually led to a war, where Zwingli himself tragically was killed in battle. But as important as Zwingli was, another figure was about to step onto the stage who would cast a much, much longer shadow. You could say Zwingli lit the match, but it was John Calvin who turned that spark into a global fire. So, John Calvin. He was a French theologian who set up shop in Geneva, and the man was an absolute genius at organizing. He literally wrote the book on Protestant theology, his Institute of Christianity, which laid out a super clear logical system for this new faith. And from that blueprint, he built the Presbyterian Church, a structure that wasn't tied to any king or country. And that is exactly why his ideas were able to spread like wildfire to France, Scotland, and eventually all over the world. All right, let's hit the brakes and completely shift gears. We're heading to England, because here the story couldn't be more different. The break from Rome had nothing to do with a theologian's deep thoughts. Nope, it was all driven by a king's very personal and very political crisis. Everybody, meet King Henry VIII. When this guy came to the throne, he was a die-hard Catholic. His famous split with the church wasn't born from sleepless nights wrestling with scripture. It came from a desperate, all-consuming need for a male heir and an equally powerful desire for a new wife. So this massive religious earthquake in England really just boiled down to three things. 1, he was terrified for his dynasty's future without a son. 2, he was frankly sick of his first wife, Catherine. And 3, he had fallen head over heels for Anne Boleyn. And the Pope in Rome? He wouldn't grant the divorce that would solve all three of his problems. So, what do you do when the most powerful religious figure on the planet tells you no? Well, if you're Henry VIII, you just go ahead and make yourself the most powerful religious figure in your own country. He had Parliament pass the Act of Supremacy, which just cut ties with Rome and, bam, put him in charge of the brand new Church of England. And here's the craziest part of the English Reformation. Henry broke away from the Pope, but he never actually became a Protestant, not in his beliefs anyway. In fact, he kept on viciously persecuting anyone who followed Luther or Calvin. He wasn't a religious reformer. He was a rebel who just wanted to be his own pope. So this top-down revolution, based entirely on the personal whims of a king, left behind a total mess. It was an incredibly unstable situation. After Henry died, the official religion of the entire country started swinging back and forth like a pendulum, depending completely on who was sitting on the throne. First up was Henry's young son, Edward VI. His advisors pushed England hard toward Protestantism, but he died young, and the crown passed to his half-sister, Mary. She was a fiercely devout Catholic, and she was absolutely determined to undo everything and drag England kicking and screaming back to the Catholic Church. And Mary wasn't afraid to use brute force. During her short 5-year reign, 277 Protestants were burned at the stake for heresy. It's how she earned her infamous nickname, Bloody Mary. Yeah, this was the most intense religious persecution the nation had ever seen. And the victims, they weren't powerful nobles or anything. They were mostly everyday people, artisans, farmers. Their very public and horrifying executions were meant to be a terrifying warning to anyone else who dared to hold on to their Protestant faith. But, and this is so important to understand, that pendulum of persecution swung both ways.
After Mary died, her Protestant successor, Queen Elizabeth I, turned the tables. Under her rule, 200 Catholic priests were executed because they refused to accept her as the head of the church. The violence was absolutely not a one-way street.
So when you put these two stories, Switzerland and England, right next to each other, the contrast is just, well, it's stark. And it's that contrast that really tells the whole story of the Protestant Revolt. And this table just lays it all out perfectly. In Switzerland, the driver was theology, new ideas. In England, it was all about royal ambition. In one, the key figure was a thinker, John Calvin. In the other, a king, Henry VIII. And this led to completely different results. A global church based on a shared belief versus a national church based on loyalty to the crown. It was a bottom-up revolution of ideas versus a top-down revolution of pure state power. These two revolutions, born out of the very same moment in history, kicked off centuries of arguments about faith, power, government, and the rights of the individual. And they leave us with a question that, honestly, we're still grappling with today. When the massive institutions of church and state collide, who really has the final say?